Hey everybody, Brent here with Nutrition First Coaching, and we're going to continue rolling in today's video with learning about common terms in the health and fitness world so that we can be on that same communication platform and know what we're talking about when we refer to common things before we get into breaking and busting some myths in a couple videos down the road. So today we're going to cover a couple things that you probably think you know already. Hopefully you'll learn something new. And then you can communicate this to everybody around you and have intelligent conversations with people about your body and how we digest and process foods. All right, let's get into the video. All right, let's get into part 2 of what you think you know about your body. Today we're going to continue with more nutritional terms and some common things that maybe we throw around in our language, or things we talk about to somebody else and they think it means one thing and we think it means something else. So let's try to get a little common ground here. So we're going to start with calories. So what is a calorie? We all say like, oh, I'm counting my calories, or how many calories is this food? Or maybe even read a label and you're like, oh, 150 calories, that's nothing. But what a calorie really is a measure of the energy value of food. So technically it's how much energy it takes to heat 1 kilogram of water by 1 degree Celsius. That really means nothing, honestly. But what it is everything we take in that contains calories. So we can subtract out like water from that equation. We need those calories broken down in our body to obtain energy from them. So this is where the quality debate comes in, with quality of food versus just strict calories, like, eating Twinkies and Ho-Hos versus eating grass-fed beef and sweet potatoes. So that's really where a calorie falls in, a measure of energy value in food. Now let's talk about macronutrients. So macronutrients technically are the nutritive components in food. And we all think of our macros as these, macro view of something, or a macro amount is this large amount of something. So that's exactly what it is. The macronutrients are the large amounts of what we need in the 3 major ones: protein, fat, and carbs. And you probably think 3 major ones, there's only 3 macros, right? Well, technically there's more. So there's also water. That's a macronutrient, but it doesn't technically have a caloric value to it. So no energy is derived from water, but pretty much every process in our body happens with water because it's such a good solvent. So we can dilute things into water, and then that's how we use it in our bodies. And that's why you die if you get too dehydrated, or if you get too much water and you get what's called hyponatremia. It dilutes everything and you can die from that. So water's technically a macronutrient. And then, this guy always rolls into the conversation, alcohol. Again, this is the opposite, but still there's calories in alcohol, but there's no nutritive value, versus water, where there's no nutritive value, but there's something specific in water that we need: the hydrogen, the oxygen, that solvent. So I think I said that correctly. But alcohol, there are calories. Maybe you've looked at the back of a beer and it says 120 calories, and you think, where am I getting 120 calories from? Well, in your body, it kind of gets digested as a poison. Yes, it's a poison. And for that fact, we can label it either as a fat or a carbohydrate, depending on how we want to give ourselves those calories. Can't label it as a protein. We'll get into that in a minute. But alcohol has to have some caloric value to it because of how our body treats it. We do, the old beer belly. You drink enough beer, you're going to gain weight, right? So there's the old calories in versus calories out. And then I would even argue that maybe the 6th macro is oxygen. Because if we're not breathing correctly, we're not getting oxygen to our cells and to our tissues, we're going to have trouble, and we need that in large amounts. So on the opposite side of the macronutrients are the micronutrients. That's where vitamin and minerals and those guys come in. We'll talk a little bit more about them later. So let's talk about the three major macros: protein, carbs, and fat. So protein is really one or more long chain of amino acids. So there's 22 of these guys out there. They can be put into different sequences, and we need certain ones out of our diet, which is what we call the essential amino acids, and there's technically 9 of those guys. And then there's amino acids that we can manufacture in our body and we can use. So we really need this protein in kind of this profile when we're eating foods, whether we're combining certain foods or if we're eating animal products. Usually all the amino acids are available in larger amounts in these, meats and organ meats and, animal meats essentially. So you've probably all heard of branched chain amino acids, or BCAAs. Well, what these guys are some of these amino acids, some of these 22, and they're put together in this branched chain sequence. So there's really 3 of these guys. I won't get into all the terminology, leucine, isoleucine, and valine. So these guys can be digested by the body a little easier, plus you're getting some of the essentials in there. So that's where the branched chain aminos can come in. But there's been a lot of push that BCAAs really don't have much value to them, other than the fact that they are a branched chain amino, but they're not really great for our body to digest. We typically get quite a bit of them in our diet. But if you are going to supplement with EAAs, essential amino acids, because we need to get those out of our diet and we can't manufacture them in our body. So protein is very complicated, essentially makes up everything in our body: skin, organs, bones, nails, hair. Everything needs protein. And then of course muscle, which is really the last thing that gets protein in our diet, is to build muscle. Yes, maintenance of connective tissue, tendons, ligaments, muscle, like we talked about in the last video, but we don't get a ton of that pushed into building muscle. Now, if we're looking at what amino acids actually help us build muscle, lots of studies look at about 2 to 3 grams of leucine as one of our amino acids, that we need that much to stimulate what's called muscle protein synthesis and to start growing some muscle, along with some of the stress of resistance training, weightlifting, something that stresses our muscles. So anyway, I won't get too much into that. Protein, let's go on to carbohydrates. Believe it or not, our preferred fuel source for our body. Why? Because carbohydrates are carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. 3 pretty important things, and they're basically every plant and every fruit is a carbohydrate. And then there's all those things made in factories and broken down processed type of things, and they're usually carbohydrates too. And in a carbohydrate's simplest form, it becomes glucose. So no matter what you eat in a carb, sugars, starches, and then some fibers that we can digest, they all eventually become glucose, which is our body's preferred fuel source. We can use it and produce energy quickly, but we only get a limited amount of energy out of it compared to fat that we're going to talk about next. So if we're looking at carbohydrates alone, let's talk about the simple versus complex of carbohydrates. A simple carbohydrate, going to the most basic one, is going to be sugar or sucrose or fructose, these basic broken down components of a carbohydrate. And if we're going to the more complex, now we're talking starchy vegetables that contain fiber and a lot of other micronutrients, along with carbohydrates like sweet potatoes, basically any plant-based carbohydrates, you name it, broccoli, spinach, carrots, all those guys, and all of our fruits are going to be the more complex carbohydrates that eventually they're all broken down into glucose, and whatever fiber is left, we're either going to digest it, which is called the soluble fiber, or we can't digest it and it's going to help with stool bulk and kind of push things through, called the insoluble fiber. Super oversimplified here, but that's how carbohydrates work in our body. Now let's go on to fat. So just to cover these guys, you get 4 calories of energy from 1 gram of protein, 4 from carbohydrate, and you get 9 from fat, roughly rounded to those numbers. So wow, twice as much energy from fat as you do from the other two macros. Sounds like a lot, right? Well, it is, but in your body, it's a much more complicated process to turn fat into energy, and it has to happen much slower. So for those lower threshold activities, walking, low aerobic, running, cycling, some of those things that are allowing your body to kind of recover as you're doing them, fat's a good fuel source. But when we need high intensity stuff, we're sprinting, running, lifting weights, carbohydrates are the preferred fuel source. We go back and forth between both of them. Our body's super smart. It has different energy systems. Let's leave it at that for now. So fat is what I like to call for fuel and protection. We need some fat on us. This protects our organs. This helps our body produce hormones, but it also is a great fuel source. Even the most lean individuals have enough fat on them to provide enough energy for something crazy like 25 marathons or something like that. So lots of energy from fat. But there's really 4 types. There's saturated fat, there's monounsaturated fat, polyunsaturated fats, and then there's trans fats. And when we're thinking about these as foods, saturated fats are usually your animal products, cheeses, butters, they're those solid things at room temperature, coconut oils, and then, which is really a butter because it's solid at room temperature. But anyway, monounsaturated, so these get into our healthier oils like olive oils, and some of the avocados, we get into those monounsaturated. Those are technically better for us heart health wise, even though we need a balance of all of these. And then polyunsaturated are more of your plant oils in there too, with the trans fats basically not normally occurring in nature. However, animals can ingest things and turn them into trans fats, but how we really get them into our diets are, if you know me, you're gonna laugh here, but the industrialized seed oils. So these seed oils that have been mass produced, 20-step processes to get oil or fat out of these certain plants. This is your canola oil from a rapeseed plant. This is your kind of like tropical oils, and they get stuff out of them and they make them into these oils, and then they fry things in these giant vats, and they become a trans fat, and the structure of the fat is changed, and they're very, very bad for you. Try to stay away from them at all costs. They've been added into all labels, as of the last 6 or 8 years, because they are so bad for you. They weren't letting food manufacturers use them at all. That doesn't mean they're not in there in slight amounts, but not enough that they have to report them. So anyway, that's my rant on trans fats. Think about fats as very important for our body. Fats don't technically make you fat. That's an old myth from the 80s. But we also need certain types of fats along with cholesterol, which I'm going to put in the fat category, because cholesterol provides structure, transportation, and it really helps our hormone system. The best way to think about cholesterol is it transports things in and out of the cells around our body, and we need different types of cholesterol in a balance to be healthy. The best way to think about fats are whatever you eat in your fats, the healthier they are, the healthier your cell linings are, the healthier your gut linings are, the healthier your nerve cells and the outside of your nerves, which conduct the electricity, are. So we need those fats to be healthy, but we need good fats. You're eating the crummy trans fats, the industrialized seed oils, that's what your cells, your intestinal linings, and your nervous system are made out of, and what we eat is what we become. So look at what you eat. Hopefully this kind of sheds some light on a few terms here, and we're going to keep going with a few of these videos. Just keep up the education. Hopefully you learn something you can pass on to somebody else. It always helps to talk to somebody else about what you've learned, and that really helps drive home that point. Maybe you'll find that one of your friends thought something meant something totally different, and you guys can have a great conversation about it. I appreciate everybody watching. Like and subscribe to us. Try to pass these videos on to friends and family that you think might benefit from them, and I'll see you next time.